Today, we're making an easy Irish whiskey with malted barley, unmalted barley, and oats. It's going to give you a taste of all-grain brewing with a huge safety net so you can't screw it up. And the best part is, we're using simple, basic home distilling equipment.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
How's it going, Chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, and this is Still It. And this is the Irish whiskey I've just finished making, and you guys can make it as well. Now, this is the second video in the T501, or the next step recipe series, I guess we can call it. Now, if you haven't watched the first one, I would suggest going and doing so. I'll link it up here, and I'm going to put it in the description down below. The reason being is that video is 40 minutes long. It really goes into the detail of the process. This video is going to be much more recipe-based rather than process-based. The idea of this series is to allow new distillers who want to move past making sugar washes and using essences, or maybe even doing something like the UJ-SSM, which is great, by the way. But if you're a little bit wary about jumping straight to all-grain washes, these are the recipes for you. So we're going to do an all-grain wash. You're going to learn how to do it. It's not that scary, but we have a huge safety net of using sugar as well. So even if you completely screw the all-grain wash up, you've still got the flavor from it, and it's still going to ferment. You're going to be able to distill it and get a tasty product because we've got the sugar as well. We are going to be using the T500, and in this video we're going to use the Alembic Dome. The last video I did, linked in the description down below, used the Reflux Colum, and you can do that for this recipe as well. And of course, obviously, you don't need to use a still spirits product. Anything even remotely like this is going to get the job done. I think that's all I need to tell you. Should we just get stuck in? I think we should get stuck in. Let's talk about the grist. A grist is just a fancy word for the stuff we put into a mash. Our ingredients, I guess you could call it. And these three things here are our ingredients for this Irish whiskey. The first one we're going to talk about is the base malt. This is the backbone of any mash. Well, most mashes anyway. And this stuff has the enzymes that are going to convert the starches in all of this into sugar for our yeast to eat. If this is starting to freak you out already, don't stress about it. I'm not going to talk about the ideas behind this so much. This is a recipe video. Check this video out here, which I've just put out, that goes into depth on this kind of thing a whole lot more. Anyway, this is Gladfield Ale malt. It's a base malt and it's a pale ale malt. So you can substitute it out for a bunch of different things. All of the quantities in metric and imperial are going to be down in the description down below, along with some substitute sort of things that you can switch stuff like this out for. Cool? We're going to use 4 kilos of this stuff. Next up, this is unmalted barley. It is barley that has not been through the malting process, funnily enough. And this is the magic stuff that makes Irish whiskey whiskey, in my opinion. However, it is very important for this recipe that we don't use raw barley. We need barley that has already been cooked for us. There are different names that people have put on this kind of thing. This is steam flecked barley, and I actually bought this from an animal feed store, funnily enough. They may also call it steam rolled, hot rolled, steam flaked, steam flecked. Man, what else? Torrefied. There's a bunch of different names for it. At the end of the day, you just want barley that's already been gelatinized. Once again, check that other video out I was telling you about. All right, anyway, moving on. Oats. I just spilled oats all over the place. But we do need oats as well. Oh, sorry guys. We're using 3 kilos of the steam-rolled barley. We need these oats to be cooked as well. You can buy the stuff from the supermarket. It is literally the stuff you make porridge out of if you're into that for breakfast. The stuff that turns into porridge really, really quickly. You don't have to boil it for ages. These are the oats that we want for this recipe. Quick oats, easy oats, they normally got names like that. We're using 750 grams of oats. This is the thing that gives Irish whiskey the Irish flavor, in my opinion. So this is going to contribute to that soft, mellow crumpets and butter and honey, or shortbread, or for the Americans out there, biscuits with butter and honey on it. This is the thing that makes that happen. That's why we're including it. The oats, yes, you can completely find traditional Irish whiskies with oats in it. That is totally a normal thing. And this is going to help us really dial that up a little bit more. Because we're using so much sugar in this recipe, obviously we can't call this an Irish whiskey. I'm not an island, and I'm adding sugar to it. But that sugar is essentially robbing us of flavor, and more importantly, in my opinion, mouthfeel. This is going to help combat that a little bit. Now, a reminder, guys, all of that stuff needs to be crushed. If it's not crushed, or milled, as we like to call it, it's not going to do much. Your efficiency in the mash is going to be terrible. Not that it matters too much, but you can either mash it with one of those things, a barley mill, or if you're buying it from a homebrew store, they will almost certainly mill it for you. Now, the next step, guys, we are going to need our T500 still, but we do not need, whoops, my gasket's coming off. We do not need the top part. What we're going to do is fill this bad boy up with 16 litres. That's, I don't know, this much, whatever that is, in freedom units. We're going to fill it up with 16 litres of water and start this thing warming up. Our goal here is we want all of the grain nicely mixed into the water, and as soon as it's all mixed in, we want it to be at 64 degrees Celsius. That in Fahrenheit. The easiest way to do this is with a strike water calculator. There is one on chasethecraft.com, link in the description down below as well. Because we're all doing the same recipe, the only difference, the only variable between what I'm doing here and what you're doing at your place will be the ambient temperature. So please, guys, do use that calculator to make sure you get the right temperature to start with. The number that calculator spits out is the temperature that you want the water to get to right before you start adding in your malt. When you start getting close to that strike water temperature, you can get your brew in a bag ready. Now, guys, quick warning here, if you're going to be using this pot to change temperatures, and if you follow this exactly, you will, please make sure that you're keeping that bag away from the bottom of the pot. Foreshadowing. Once the strike water gets to temperature, the one from the calculator that you got, start mixing your grains in and make sure that the still is turned off at this point. Here's the thing, guys. Go slow. A little bit of grain, mix it up. A little bit more grain, mix it up. If you don't do this, if you go too fast or you don't mix enough, you can get dough balls. Once everything's all mixed back in, find an impromptu lid for your still, insulate it all up, and we're going to let this sit for 45 minutes. You know what, guys, with 45 minutes, you could legitimately be well on your way to creating a really cool website with today's sponsor, Squarespace. I built this website for my dad. I know it's ugly. Get over it. I built it like 10 years ago. Give me a break. Anyway, he just got in touch with me and he's asked me to update a few things about the website. The only thing I can remember about this website is that I kind of hand coded it somehow. Just to update something simple is probably going to take me 3 hours just to work that out, and then another couple of hours to actually change the thing. With that amount of time, I could legitimately build him an upgraded modern website with Squarespace. The best part is, in 2 or 3 years' time, when I need to update something for him or change something for him, it's going to be easy because Squarespace has amazing user interface. It's all just laid out logically. I can even give other people access to certain parts of the website to update it or contribute to it, to build certain parts of the website, which just makes so much sense because my sister's a graphic designer and, I mean, she can do the designy stuff, right? To be fair, her job's going to be easy too because of all the amazing templates that Squarespace has to offer. So, Dad, I hope you don't watch this before Father's Day, mate, because happy Father's Day, new website. So, when you're ready to make your very own website, go to squarespace.com to start your own free trial. And when you're ready to purchase your first website or domain, don't forget me, go to squarespace.com/stillit to get 10% off. Once that 45 minutes is almost up, get your jug, fill it up, and get it boiling. If you live in a civilized country and have an electric kettle, otherwise use the stove or the microwave or whatever else you want to do. You're aiming for 2 to 4 litres of almost boiling water. We're going to need that in a second. Now, pop the top off your kettle or your still, and you're going to notice a few things when you give it a stir. Number one is that it is starting to cool down a little bit. It's probably dropped 1-2 degrees Celsius, depending on how well you insulated it. Number two, you'll notice that when you give it a stir, it's going to be a whole lot thinner. That's a good thing. It means the enzymes are doing their job, and because the enzymes are doing their job, when you stick your finger in it and have a taste, it's going to taste sweet. Not sweet like syrup or candy. It's not going to be that sweet, so don't be disappointed if you're at that point, but sweet like cereal with sugar on it rather than just straight cereal, which is pretty much what we started with at the beginning, right? All right, so give that thing a good stir. Make sure you give the bag a lift so it's not touching the bottom. Once again, foreshadowing, but turn the element on and keep on stirring. And at this point, you can add that hot water out of the kettle in there as well. You should have a little bit of headspace left, and that's going to help raise the temperature. Because the stuff that we're working with, these grains are not specifically modified, the unmalted barley and the oats. They're not specifically malted for brewing process. Well, they might need a little bit more time, and we're going to give them a little bit more heat to make sure, just to make sure. So we're going to heat this thing up to 67 degrees with the element and the boiling water. That's going to help. Remember guys, anytime the element is on, make sure you're stirring, okay? Once you hit the 67 degree mark, cover it back up again, insulate it again, and leave it for another 45 minutes. That 45 minutes is the perfect time to get our safety net sorted. And if you remember at the beginning in the intro, or if you did the last T501 recipe, that safety net, you will know, is good old-fashioned table sugar. Here's the deal, guys. We're going to be making an inverted sugar. Does it really make a difference? I can't prove it. Personally, I think it does make a small difference. I think it helps slightly with that odd mouthfeel, that piercingness that you get from using table sugar and stuff like this. So we're going to have 4 liters of hot water, add to it 6 kilograms. For those of you that are heathens, this much. I'm joking, guys. I love you. Honest. And 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. Give it a good mixing up, and we're going to simmer that for 20 minutes. When the sugar has been simmering for 20 minutes, you can dump that into your fermenter. Now we're going to be aiming for about 60 liters total volume here, so I would suggest having one of 2 things. Number one is have a fermenter that's at least probably 80 liters in total volume, so it doesn't just bubble over when it gets to fermenting. Or 2, have perhaps 3 30-liter fermenters, you know, the buckets that are really popular at homebrew stores. 3 of those will probably do you good, 20 liters in each. Obviously, if you're doing it with the 3, split the sugar syrup evenly between the 3 fermenters. And it should be right about this point in time where your 45 minutes is running out on the mash timer. So once again, pop the lid, give it a stir for good luck, and you can hoist your bag up. Ideally, you've put your mash tun, our still, underneath something that's sturdy enough to lift it with a rope. Because if you haven't, it might be a little bit difficult. It's doable, but difficult. And if you didn't take my advice, like me, you may find that you have burnt the bottom of your bag. That is literally because these bags are made out of nylon, I think. Nylon, right? Someone tell me if I'm wrong. Nylon, right? I hope, maybe. I almost redid this because I didn't want people to freak out and stress about this. And then I realized that actually it's a really good teaching opportunity. Me screwing up is going to help you from screwing up because number one, you can use some pretty standard everyday items to work kind of like a false bottom. Put something that is obviously food safe and used to being hot, cooking utensils mostly, in the bottom of the still to keep the bag up off the bottom. Colanders work well, perhaps a pot lid. You get the idea. Just make sure that there's nothing on there that's going to melt and make sure that it's not going to trap sugary liquid on the element and it won't stir it up. That's going to help you a whole lot. But if you do find yourself in the situation that I'm in, don't stress about it. It's not a big deal. Hoist the bag up, let it drip for about 15 minutes until it slows right down. Switch it out with a different pot so you can tip your big mash into your fermenter and pop another pot underneath it to catch the excess drips coming off the bag. Those that are a little bit more advanced amongst you might be asking either about squeezing the bag or about doing a sparge. If you want to do either of those things, please, by all means, go ahead. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, don't stress about it. Let the bag drip. You're going to be fine. If you guys do get to this point and you do have the problem where your bag is split or your grains are all just mixed in or whatever, or you never used a bag in the first place and you mashed without a bag, don't stress about it. Put all of it into the fermenter. It's going to be fine. We'll deal with it later. At this point in time, we're going to have roughly about 20 liters of rather hot liquid and very, very sugary liquid in our fermenter. So here's the deal, team. We're going to add water to it with 2 goals in mind. Number one is to get to right around, I say around because it doesn't matter if you miss this by a liter or so, but 60 liters in total. Number 2 is that we're going to be aiming for a specific temperature, which is going to be 26 degrees Celsius. That, once again, here you go, that is a whole lot more important. So if you get to 55 liters and it's still hot, add cold water. If you get to 55 liters and you're down to 18 degrees, start putting hot water in. You guys get the idea, right? Yeah, you understand? All right, so now you've got 60 liters of wash at 26 degrees or thereabouts temperature. And what I want you to do is use your hydrometer to take a gravity reading. Your gravity is going to be between 1060 and 1070. And that is going to hit us right in the 8% range when this ferments out. Don't stress too much if you're a little bit either side of it, but I just want you to make sure that you're in that 1060 to 1070 range, or pretty close to it. And I want you to take a note of exactly what that hydrometer is telling you at the beginning before we pitch our yeast. What you're going to want to do now is give it a really, really good thrashing to oxygenate it as much as possible. And honestly, guys, these little guys here are absolute wonders on the end of an electric drill. Yeast, our secret weapon. We need a secret weapon because we're using a safety net. Now, I should say, actually, guys, if you wanted to, you could just triple the mash that we made and not use the safety net at all, as well as acting as our safety net. Unfortunately, it's going to do a couple of bad things. Number one is it's going to kind of dilute the flavor a little bit. We're going to have more alcohol but the same amount of grain. And number two is it's going to bump the mouthfeel in the wrong direction. It's going to get thin, it's going to get a little bit piercing. We don't want that. We're using the oats, the higher percentage of oats, to try and combat the mouthfeel, and the yeast is our little secret weapon to try and combat the loss in flavor. We're going to be using SO4. Now this stuff is the stuff that the English make their English soft, fruity ales with. We're going to do something kind of crazy with it. We're going to grossly underpitch the stuff. We're going to use 2 packets of the stuff in 60 liters at a quite high gravity. And number two, we're going to ferment it quite warm. So we're going to ferment it at 26 degrees Celsius. No hydrating, nothing. Sprinkle the stuff on top and we're good to roll. So what we've done is really stress this yeast out in the attempt to make it throw a whole lot of esters, those fruity esters out to bump up the fruity, sort of pleasant flavors that I associate with Irish whiskey. The downside is that this specific yeast and treating it this way may mean that we don't get a completely dry fermentation. So what I'm suggesting you do is at about day 4, day 5, when things start to slow down potentially, you can dump in a whole bunch of baker's yeast if you want to, or you can use something a little bit more fancy, a nice ale yeast, or even a rum yeast. To be honest, the flavor contribution from this yeast is not going to be that much because things are already humming, there's almost no sugar left. It's just there to dry things out, get as much sugar fermented as we can. And I used 60 grams of baker's yeast and got down to 1.003. Once your fermentation is finished, it's time to start getting your liquid into the still. Now, here's the thing, guys. If you didn't rip your bag and you don't have grain in it, you can siphon that stuff out of your fermenter if you want to, or just scoop it out with a bucket straight into the still. If you did get grain into the fermentation, that's no problem at all. One of these guys and a little bit of patience, as my little lockdown assistant is now demonstrating, you can get it in here, no problems. You know, it's going to take a little bit longer. It'll be just fine. Don't stress about it. Another thing, guys, do not, and I mean do not do it. Don't fill it past about 20 liters. Now that is less, much less than what this thing says, the volume where it says max. Don't fill it anywhere near that. The reason is that these things are generally used with sugar washes, and all grain wash is so much more likely to boil all the way over and puke. You don't want to do it. In fact, like my other assistant is now showing you, you may even want to throw a couple of knobs of butter in there to help keep that foam down. All right, guys, once you're full, like I said earlier, I am going to be using this bad boy here, the Alembic Dome, to distill. If you don't have the dome, that is fine. Don't stress out. Watch the other video that I linked at the very beginning of the video. It's down in the description below. The other T501 recipe, and it's going to show you how to do this with the column and detune it and basically turn it into a pot still. Forget about this thing. Forget about it. Guys, trust me, so many new distillers get hung up on this and it doesn't help you at all. The only thing it does, literally the only thing it does with a pot still is tell you how far through the run you are. Forget about it. Keep running the still until the stuff dripping off the spout right here gets down to at least 20%. Go down to 20% coming off the spout. If you can, and you've got time and you're not stressing out about it, go down to 10%. That's going to make things easier later on. That is our first stripping run done. We need to do 2 more. All you need to do those is empty the crap in here out. We don't need it anymore. Ditch it, fill it up again, and do the same thing. We're going to collect the low wines, which is the stuff coming off the stripping runs, and we're going to add them all back together, give the pot a clean out, and you'll see this line right about here on the still in the B-roll I'm putting on screen now. That's how far up the stuff boiled. So from like here to here, that's how much foam built up. Yeah, do you see what I mean, guys? Very close. Give the still a quick wash down to get all the goop out of it. Fill it back up with the low wines, and we're ready to distill again. Now we're ready for our spirit run. And yes, I am only going to double distill this. And no, Irish whiskey does not have to be triple distilled. Look at this. Look at what's on screen right now. Trust me, guys. Yes, a lot of Irish whiskey is triple distilled. No, we don't have to. And because we're using our crutch, because we're using our safety net, I would suggest that you don't want to triple distill. If you want to and you want to give it a go, that's fine. By all means, go right ahead. Once the still is up to temperature for the spirit run, ditch the first 200 mils. You don't want to keep that stuff, use it for firelighter or cleaning windows or flushing down the toilet. You don't want to drink the stuff. Next up is going to come the heads. I would suggest collecting about a litre and then starting to taste, just with your finger, the stuff that's coming off the still. You're looking for the piercing, tingly, prickly, nail polish remover, all of that stuff. You're looking for that to slowly fade out. And when it fades out, you can switch over into hearts. Now for me, I did that at 200 mils and then another 1.6 litres. That's roughly where you're going to be making the cut to hearts, but it might be different for you, so do it by taste. If you're not used to this process, if you're not used to making cuts, I would 100% recommend taking small jars, 250 to 500 ml jars, collect everything into jars, lay them out in order in a big long line, and then once you're finished, go down the line and taste them. If you want to know more about that, there's videos to help you with it. Just know that it's a thing and it will help you out. I decided to cut over to tails at 55%. 55% ABV coming off the spout is the point where I decided to cut to tails. I will often go much lower than that, but because this is a pretty clean style of whiskey, I didn't want to go down deep. 55% for me is where it just started to turn the corner and where I first started getting the hint of that wet dog stuff. Cut it straight out. But once again, I suggest you do this by taste. So now you can collect up all of your hearts, take a reading with an alchemeter to see the ABV it's at, and proof it down. Now, I would suggest using a proofing calculator. There's one on chasethecraft.com that you can use. And I would suggest you proof this down to 57% for aging. Before we get on to the last part of this video, talking about aging the spirit and what it's hopefully going to turn into, I need to give the Patreons a huge, huge thank you. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate it. This is going to be a bonus video, an extra video, and that's thanks to you guys. Thanks to Patreons for bringing us an extra video this week. Cheers, guys. Which brings me to the point that I'm at now. This is the spirit that I have ready, proof to 57%, ready to receive wood. Aren't we all? But what I haven't told you is that I have taken a sample and force aged it. The reason I do it is not to make this taste delicious. The reason is to get an idea of what's going to happen. I've used second use oak, and I would suggest you do the same because that is going to give this lovely golden color rather than a more red bourbon color. I think it suits whiskey, Irish whiskey more, and it's also going to give a better Irish whiskey flavor profile. Soft, delicate, more honey sweetness, less of the like deep caramel, sort of bourbony, barrel candy flavors. I think that suits. So let me tell you what's going on here now. It's soft, it's buttery, it has that side of it wrapped up beautifully. What it doesn't have yet is the green apple and the honey that I've really come to expect from a lot of Irish whiskies. That, I am guessing, is going to have to come with a little bit of age. I will continue to use second use oak. This is oak that I've used to basically make a bourbon style whiskey, and I'm going to be using oak to age this. That is how much I'm putting in this one. And this one, I'm going to age for 4 months, which for me, for this kind of product, is a short amount of time. This is going to need more time to age than the last whiskey we made in this style, because it isn't so big, it's not so bold, it's relying more on prettiness. And in this one, I'm actually going to put a little bit more oak than this, even though it's a smaller volume. And the idea being that I'm hoping that I can test this in 2 months and probably, hopefully have something resembling a result after tasting this and making assumptions of what I think is going to happen in 2 months. If 2 months is about as long and patient as you can be, you may want to think about dosing this just a wee bit with a little bit of honey. almost season the spirit a little bit, clean it up a little bit, give it a little bit more of that wood sugar presence a little bit earlier than it really has right to have, and just take the rough edge off the back end of it just a little bit quicker. Just an idea. It's entirely up to you. Do I think this is going to make something that represents an Irish whiskey well? I really do. I really and truly do. Smelling and tasting this, I am getting half to 3/4 of that Irish experience. I'm waiting on some green apple, a little bit of that kind of honey glazed, Danishy kind of pastry thing, and just a little bit of a rounding of the rough new spirit. Once that comes in, and I'm almost certain that'll come in at about 4 to 6 months, I think this is going to be really tasty. And we've done it in a way that is easy and approachable to the new distiller. Is it going to be as good as an all grain spirit? No, of course not. But that's the way these things go. So I hope this gives people out there that are considering taking the leap into all grain spirits a nudge, a little bit of confidence to just give something a go. Or if you've been making spirits for a while and you want to give it a go as well for whatever reason tickles your fancy, by all means, get stuck in, guys, and let me know in the comment section once you start getting results. Tell us how it works for you, and maybe we can adjust the recipe. Anyway, team, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, please give the subscribe button in the bottom right corner a click, and I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.